Thank you for the introduction, and hello everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Toma, and I'm very excited to present on a topic that I truly believe can significantly improve your testing strategies. Mock, proxy, repeat, elevate your testing with WireMock. So, I have been a QA engineer for about 7 years now, and I currently work at SiteGround, where I do both manual and automated testing. And last year was actually my very first time here at Easter, but I was upstairs at the lobby at our SiteGround stand at the booth, where I would say I've met a lot of amazing people. It was great. We talked, we laughed, we had fun, we played games. There was even this magician, a colleague from another company that did some magic card tricks with me. So, to be honest, I never imagined that a year later, I'm going to be standing here on this stage and talk about API mocking. But I guess this is what Easter is about, right? It's about sharing knowledge, it's about sharing experience, and connecting people, connecting professionals. So let me tell you how I got here. A few months back, I didn't know much about WireMock. But one morning at the office, we saw that there were like a lot of tests failing in our nightly automated builds. And at first we thought that the reason is with us, like the issue is somewhere in our code. But after carefully analyzing the results, we found out that actually the issue was external one. And we were dependent on a third-party VAT validation service that at some point started working slowly, or it wasn't working at all, like the API was down. Or at some point, it was even rejecting any input without no reason. So in order testing not to be blocked and testing processes to go smoother, we decided to mock this external API, to create a mock API that looks and behaves exactly as the real one. So I had to fix this, and I had to quickly learn how to work with WireMock. And here I am, long story short, sharing with you how WireMock saved us countless hours of stress. So what is actually WireMock? WireMock is an open source tool designed for API mocking and service virtualization. It supports HTTP-based APIs, and it allows you to have full control over the API behavior and simulate responses for testing purposes. So don't get me wrong. I know you're going to ask why WireMock? Why not something else? Like, why not any other tool? Well, the short answer is that I didn't choose WireMock, but the problems we faced chose it for us. So when I joined the SiteGround team, WireMock was already established solution. And we continue using it because of 3 simple and very pragmatic reasons. First, WireMock is free, and it is stable, and it has huge community, and it is constantly updated. And secondly, WireMock solves our specific pain point. As you're about to see, we had huge and big headaches with a payment sandbox. And not at last, WireMock is simple. It easily integrates with our testing stack, and it can be easily configured, and overall, you just basically can get started easily with WireMock. So something else might fit better in your project, but I'm here just to show you how WireMock helped us to gain control over our dependencies. So the main idea behind WireMock is to eliminate any dependencies from third-party services, from any live services or external APIs that your application is using. So you can use WireMock in unit testing to isolate the code being tested. You can use WireMock in integration testing to simulate the external APIs and check if your application interacts correctly with them. You can use WireMock in performance testing, like simulating different faults and errors, timeouts and delays, and check how your application, like, it performs in different conditions. Or you can use WireMock in end-to-end testing and even edge cases and scenarios that are hard to hit and reproduce on live and production environment. So WireMock gives you flexibility. It's best for complex scenarios. And WireMock speeds up testing. Test execution becomes faster. Later, you'll see an example how saving a few seconds here and there when you have thousands of tests, the impact is huge. So WireMock brings also stability. Tests are less flaky because you have predictable and reliable API behavior. And WireMock lowers the maintenance efforts. As I said, it enhances your test coverage. And WireMock optimizes the resource usage. And not at last, WireMock can be easily integrated, let's say, with CI/CD. So I was talking with a colleague from the dev team, and I was explaining to him what is actually WireMock. And after a few minutes, he just decided to Google it. And he said, like, why didn't you just say that WireMock is a web server? So, okay, yes, WireMock is a web server, and to be more specific, it is a mock HTTP server. And this is how it looks when it's up and running. By default, it runs on port 8080. It also supports the secure one. And there are many ways you can use WireMock. You can always go and use the cloud version of WireMock. You can use the standalone version of WireMock. You just have to have Java installed on your machine. Or you can use WireMock as a library. But the way we leverage WireMock at SiteGround is using it with Docker. So basically, you just have to execute a Docker command that will automatically pull the latest WireMock image from the Docker hub and install it locally on your machine and store it in the Docker cache. And at SiteGround, we've mocked a lot of APIs, a lot of third-party services and external APIs that we are using and we are working with. I already mentioned about this VAT validation system, but we've mocked some of the payment providers that we are working with and we are using. And later, I'm going to do a quick demo for you how and why we've mocked a critical payment provider. And we've mocked even some of the Google APIs, and we've mocked many, many internal processes and services. So how does actually WireMock works? Let's check this workflow diagram. As you can see, WireMock stands in the middle. It acts as the middleman between the client application and the external API. So what happens is that the client application sends an HTTP request, which we proxy to the WireMock server, which is up and running. And what does WireMock do is that it goes and checks if there are any stubs or configurations saved for this particular HTTP request. And if it finds one, it matches the request. And then WireMock returns the mock API response back to the client application. Basically, it returns the simulated API response. But if WireMock doesn't detect any stub or configuration saved for this particular HTTP request, it acts just as a proxy. And it proxies the request to the external API, which from its side forwards back the response to WireMock, and then WireMock returns the API response to the client application. And the stubs are the actual mocks. Stubbing is a key feature of WireMock. Stubbing allows you to have predefined HTTP responses for request matching criteria. And how do you create a stub? Well, for the sake of this example, I've used Postman just to have better visualization. And don't get me wrong, here we are creating a stub over API. So how do you create something? With a post request, in our case to the local host on port 8081, where actually WireMock server is up and running, and to the admin mappings folder. At the mappings folder, all the stubs are created and stored. And here we are creating, in this example, a stub for a get method with URL SiteGround client1. So it's a very simple one, and it just returns status 200 and body message saying millions of happy customers get better website presence with us, you can too. And once you click on the send button, you can see that the stub is successfully created. And it looks exactly as we want it. WireMock just added to it a unique ID. And once again, we created this stub over API. But don't get me wrong, as you can see, it's just a simple object. It's nothing more but just a JSON, so you can always navigate manually to the mappings folder and create it by your own, like manually. But how do you test if this stub works? Well, you go and make a call to the SiteGround client 1 endpoint. And when you hit on the send button, you receive the exact same response with status 200 and same body message. So in similar fashion, you can create stubs for post requests and etc. But what happens when WireMock doesn't match a request? Well, as you can see in this example, we are proxying to the WireMock server a request about SiteGround client 2, but we don't have such stub. As you already saw in the previous slides, we created a stub for client 1, and WireMock detects that's the closest stub, but at the end, the request is not matched because URL doesn't match. And matching on URL is like one of the most common ways for WireMock. You can match on exact URL path, or you can match on URL path pattern, like where you can use even regular expression. And that can be actually very powerful, and later you'll see an example how with using regex, you can simulate, let's say you have thousands of clients and users. But you can match on many other attributes, such as content type and just valid XML, or body patterns and valid JSON. Or you can even match on the basic authentication attribute with any particular username and password. But if you're kind of not satisfied with the standard set of matchers that WireMock provides, you can always go and create your own one. So it's pretty much simple and straightforward. You just have to extend this request matcher extension class. And I've named this custom matcher body length matcher. It's a very simple one. It just returns body too long. And this is how the stub for it looks like once it is created. It has only one parameter, and it's for max length. So it's like, imagine you are testing and verifying an input field or any text area for max allowed characters. And when you enter more than the allowed characters, you're going to hit this validation error message. And WireMock will return and match this stub, and we return the mock API response for it. But this is just a simple example how you can customize something in WireMock. You can customize a lot of things. As for example, we've created this helper function that just extract some valuable info for us from a JW token. But you can also have like this request filter extension, or even a response transformer, and etc. And here comes the response templating. So this is another core feature of WireMock, and response templating gives you the ability to have dynamic responses. So what happens is that you can basically take values from the request being sent and use them in the response. So here is where the URL path pattern and the regular expression kicks in. So imagine this regex is our client ID. So we have SiteGround client/client ID. So it can be anything corresponding to this regular expression, of course. And as you can see in the response, for the ID, we take it from the request path. But at the end, the client will be always one and the same with first name Tom and last name Akers. And below you can see that the stub is created. And if you go and try to test it out, well, ABC5 in our case is the client ID, but as I said, it can be anything else. And we take it dynamically and use it in the response. So you can see that in the response, we have the exact same desired ID, ABC5, but as I said, the client will be hard-coded and always one and the same, Tom Akers, who is actually, like this is not a coincidence that I'm using this name. Tom Akers is a very popular name at the WireMock community because he is the original creator and currently CTO of WireMock. And how can you simulate faults and errors? Well, it's very simple. I've created this failing API. It just returns 500 server error. So if you go and try to reach it out, you receive the corresponding 500 server error. And in similar fashion, you can simulate timeouts and delays. You just have to add and use this fixed delay in milliseconds, 5,000 in our case, which stands for 5 seconds. And if you go and try to reach this slow API, at the above screenshot, you can see that like the request is being sent like it's a continuous action. You're not receiving the response immediately. But on the below screenshot, you can see that exactly after 5 seconds, you receive the delayed message. And I've showed you how you can create stubs over API, or I told you that you can just literally navigate manually to the mappings folder and create them by your own. But actually, there is no need to do all that, because WireMock gives you this powerful recorder. So this is how it looks. It has very simple UI. You can open your browser and navigate to the admin recorder, and you just have to input a target URL and hit the record button. So in our example, I've used WireMock Cloud API as target URL. And once WireMock goes in recording mode, what happens is that we have to go and do a call to the target URL. And WireMock will record for us the response and will automatically create a stub for us. So don't get confused. Here, the localhost on the secure port is basically where WireMock server is up and running. And imagine this is your target URL. This is the WireMock Cloud API. And the recordables 1, 2, 3 is nothing more but just a test endpoint that returns congratulations on your first recording. And when you go back to the recorder and click on Stop button, you can see that WireMock captured one stub mapping successfully. So WireMock created and recorded for us this exact stub. It's exactly the same, with same status 200 and same body message, congratulations on your first recording, and WireMock gave it a name, WireMock Recorder Example. So it is that simple. And now it's a time for a short demo, as promised. And as I told you, at SiteGround, we've mocked a lot of external APIs that we are working with and we are using. But I'm going to show you how we've mocked a critical payment provider. So let's see first how things work when WireMock is off. WireMock is not running. And in this example, I'm just making a simple order from our SiteGround site, and I'm ordering a hosting plan with a domain. But pay attention that when you click on Pay Now button, what happens is that we're basically connecting with the test sandbox provided to us from the banking API. And because I'm using this specific test credit card, the so-called 3D secure challenge page is triggered. And we have to complete this challenge. And after that, for some of you if don't know what's 3DS, it's just like your digital signature that identifies you as the card holder. And after that, you can see there's around 10 seconds of blank page until you're navigated to the success screen and the transaction is completed successfully. So you can see how slow things work and how unreliable and unstable they look like. So what happens if tomorrow this test sandbox doesn't work, like it's down? Or let's say there's an issue with the test credit card. And I assure you this happened not once or twice, but many times. So there is no need to be dependent on that. And now let's have a look how things work when WireMock is up and running. So we have configured our systems so that all the requests all the payment requests go through WireMock. And WireMock compares them against the stubs that we have. And instead of forwarding the request to the real payment sandbox, WireMock returns the mock success API back to the SiteGround application. And SiteGround application thinks that it has connected successfully with the payment sandbox. But we all know that that's not true. So basically, we bypassed this whole process, and we didn't saw like this 3D secure page with a challenge, this around 10 seconds blank page. We were instantly navigated to the success screen, and the transaction was completed just in milliseconds because WireMock returned the simulated success API response. And this was the exact step that was matched. We matched on body patterns and this exact test credit card that I've used with last 4 digits 3155, and the CVC doesn't matter. It should be anything different than 3 nines. And you can see that even here you can use regular expressions. And it should be case-insensitive false. And during this whole transaction process, that was not the only step that was matched, and WireMock matched many other requests. Because first, we simulate attaching the payment method with 3DS to the customer. Then we initiate the payment intent with 3DS. Then we confirm the payment intent. Then we get the payment intent details. We capture the transaction. And finally, we confirm that it is successful. So in conclusion, I would say that WireMock brings efficiency to SiteGround. It speeds up testing. Test execution becomes faster. And as I said, imagine saving a few seconds here and there when you have thousands of tests. The impact is huge. And WireMock brings stability. Tests are less flaky because you have predictable and reliable API behavior. And WireMock lowers the maintenance efforts. It enhances the test coverage, where you can test even edge cases and scenarios that are hard to reproduce on live and production environment. WireMock gives you optimized resource usage, and not at last, WireMock can be easily integrated with CI/CD, with Docker, and etc. So, don't get into the trap of unreliable APIs. Get things in control and start mocking if you haven't yet. Thank you all. I'll be happy to answer to any questions if there are any, or if we have any time left, but we can always chat after the presentation even, so thank you.
Thank you, and we're waiting you in literally 10 minutes.